I am so excited for this next guest. Most of us will go through life never receiving an Academy Award. As an editor who has worked in both feature films and television, Lisa Fruchtman has not only been nominated for the prestigious award several times, but garnered one for her work on the film The Right Stuff. And if that's not impressive enough, her talent for storytelling helped shape some of the movie history's most iconic films, including Apocalypse Now, The Godfather Part 3. Her long list of film projects also includes Children of a Lesser God, which was nominated for Best Picture, The Doctor, My Best Friend's Wedding, Dance With Me, and The Woodsman, among others. For television, she has edited the HBO films Truman, Witness Protection, Point of Origin, and Normal. Her awards and honors also include BAFTA nominations, an Emmy nomination, a Cable Ace Award. She's also a director and producer. I could go on, but we'd be here a while. We're so lucky to have her here today. Please welcome one of the world's most gifted motion picture editors, Lisa Fruchtman. Lisa, this is an honor and a privilege to have you here, to sit across from you.
Thank you for inviting me.
Put a face to these amazing films. I could talk to you all day just on Apocalypse Now alone. And everyone here, especially our filmmakers, so thrilled to have you here. So thank you for coming, even though I know you live close by.
Yeah, but I haven't been invited to a design conference before.
Well, welcome.
And I had to think about why, but I think I understand why I'm here now.
Yeah, we talked about it out back.
Yeah, I've had a chance to sit in on a couple of the other sessions, and I really feel this thread of design and story, and it does really go with what I do, which is to design an experience. You know, that's how I think about editing, actually.
Take us back to the first moments where you fell in love with filmmaking, the movies, editing, when it just hit you. What was it, and when did it all start for you?
Well, actually, it started for me a long time ago, and it was kind of an idiosyncratic path. I was going in a completely different direction, towards science, or mostly towards science or law. And then I got confused about what to apply to graduate school in. So I traveled around the world for a year. Mm-hmm. And then when I came back, I apprenticed myself to a documentary film collective, the first documentary film collective in the country that was doing socially conscious documentaries. And I showed up one day for my volunteer job, and there was a young woman editing. And I didn't know anything about film, and I didn't know anything about editing. But somehow I saw her, and I saw editing, and I thought, you know, that could be me. Seeing a woman model and learning a little bit about the editing craft, which was kind of a combination of analytical thinking and creative thinking. Really, I realized suited my brain. You know, the blank page did not suit my brain. Mm-hmm. I just decided to do it for a while until I could decide what to go to graduate school in. And every year I asked myself, okay, so now I'm going to apply to graduate school, right? And then I just kept having one fantastic experience after another. I moved to Canada, and I spent a year at the National Film Board of Canada, and that was my film school. I got hired because I was bilingual, and I worked on a French series, and I got trained as an assistant editor. And then I came to San Francisco. I was following my boyfriend, who is now my husband, but I came to San Francisco, and I was so despondent because I had left the film board. I was so despondent, and there were no jobs here. And there were no documentary jobs, which is what I was interested in.
Right.
But I went around and I met everyone, and lo and behold, I met the people at American Zoetrope.
Wow.
Francis was making Godfather Part 2, and he was still shooting, and he had an editor in LA and an editor in New York, and he was bringing them both to San Francisco and hiring a third editor. And that editor, well, first I was hired as an apprentice to work on the line script. And I never had seen a line script before, but I did it. And then I put myself on the list because I just moved to town to be interviewed as an assistant editor for that new editor, and I got the job. And so Godfather 2 was my very first feature film experience.
Wow.
And naturally, I was smitten. It was fantastic. It was a very creative, very, very creative environment. I was just an assistant, but that's how I learned everything.
It's just like a lucky moment. What was that moment? How do you kind of take that back when you think about what you just said right now?
Well, for me, and it's kind of something that has continued for me, is I just do best when I don't know exactly what's coming next, and I just let myself be open. If I think too much, I get scared, If I knew too much, I probably would be scared.
Yeah.
But I didn't really know. I just thought, well, this is really interesting. I'll do this for a while. And I just kept doing that.
At that time, he'd already made Godfather, so already immediately a legend to begin with. But being with him, being around him at that time, what was it like?
Well, he was a legend, but I wasn't particularly of that world. I wasn't particularly oriented towards Hollywood. And in fact, he was fantastic, and the whole milieu was fantastic. It was anti-Hollywood. It was, the environment here was probably something that a lot of people are feeling in San Francisco today. It was young, it was innovative, it was like non-hierarchical. It was open. I don't think I ever would have been in film had I gone to LA and worked myself very slowly up the ranks. But he was very creative and open to the ideas of anyone. And so it was very exciting and very easy, ultimately, to, after Godfather 2, I went off and I edited a documentary and did some other things. And then when Apocalypse Now came along, I was asked to come back as the first assistant to the assistant that I had been assistant to on Godfather 2. I was actually traveling in New Guinea at the time, but I had let them know where I was. And they contacted me, and so I came back to work on the film, but I came back via the Philippines. I was able to stop at the set and be on the set for a while while they were shooting. And I came back and I worked on Apocalypse as the first assistant for about 8 or 9 months. And all during that time that I was the assistant, I would work all day as an assistant. And then at night, I would just cut scenes that weren't even maybe going to ever be in the film. I was sort of teaching myself to edit.
Everybody I know that has gotten somewhere in the film did exactly what you're talking about. That you just work relentlessly to just learn the craft and go. Yeah, you have to do that, don't you?
I guess so. So then, again, it was the open, collaborative environment of the film. Some would say that the film was completely out of control because it did take 2.5 years to edit.
Wow.
Which was very, very hard experience, but certainly benefited me because I grew into the role of being an editor for the first time on Apocalypse Now.
You told me that story.
Yeah.
Can we play that scene now? You want to play that scene and talk about it a little bit?
Okay, well, I'll give you a little preview. Yeah. So Apocalypse was, they shot over 1 million feet of film. It was a very long movie.
That's a lot, by the way, for those of you who don't shoot film or haven't.
Do the calculation in today's terms, but it was certainly pre-computer, not just pre-digital, pre-computer, pre-analog, pre-videotape, pre-everything. I was only 10 years old, obviously. And so there was a lot of footage, and wading through the footage was very difficult. And finding the movie finding its form was very difficult, which is an interesting thing about all movies. When they're finally done, you think it couldn't have been any other way. But it could have been an infinite number of ways different. And Apocalypse took a long time to come into its shape. And there were many editors. There were several editors who came and went. And that was why I had the opportunity to be promoted, is that at a certain point, Jerry Greenberg, who had been on the film for about a year, left the film to edit Kramer versus Kramer. There was an opening.
Wow.
And I asked to be considered. And but of course, by that time, because of the open and collaborative relationship on the film, we had all sat around looking at scenes and discussing scenes with Francis for those 8 or 9 months. So he already knew me very well. But anyway, I was given the chance to cut a scene that was very difficult. I was given that chance by my editor, who was not so happy that I was moving away from being his assistant. So he gave me the most difficult scene he could think of, which was this dance sequence, which was shot with multiple cameras. And it was a scene of the Playboy bunnies entertaining the troops. And I guess just to give you a little heads up when you see it, it was when as it was scripted, it was an 8-minute long allegorical dance about the Vietnam War, kind of about the Vietnam War. That's why the girls are dressed as cowboys and Indians. And when it was first assembled, it was eight minutes long and not very interesting. So the task was to make it sexy and fabulous. So that was my job.
Awesome.
And maybe after we've seen it, I can talk a little bit about how the footage was manipulated, because it wasn't ever put together. By the time I did it, it was not any longer being put together the way it was intended.
Yeah, let's do that. Why don't we roll that film? That'd be great.
Charlie didn't get much USO. He was dug in too deep or moving too fast. His idea of great R&R was cold rice and a little rat meat. He had only two ways home: death or victory.
Wow. Amazing.
That was harder than it looked.
I bet. Tell us about the process you were talking about. You're not putting things together like that anymore.
Well, like I said, it was all on film. It was shot live. I can't remember exactly how many cameras, but cameras from several angles and a choreographed dance. So they were in different parts of the stage at different times. And ultimately, after putting it together a number of different ways and shortening it and trying to get rid of the story element embedded in the dance, which wasn't really working, as always in editing, whether you're editing a tightly written scene, a dialogue scene, or an action scene, films that work, and I think we're seeing at this conference even designs that work, all work because they might have a level of practicality. They're driving the story forward, or you're building the plane, or you're building the product, but underneath, you're accessing a very primal emotion in your audience. And I think that's what all great films do. They're working on kind of multiple levels. And so in editing, you're always doing both those things. You're always having to push the story forward, but you're always having to think, well, what is the story, the larger film, the whole story really about? And what the story of Apocalypse Now was really about in its largest sense in terms of the Vietnam War was the experience of the American soldiers there and the kind of the surreal dislocation that they felt. That's a lot of the quality of the film, the operatic and surreal quality of the film is about that. And so really in the end, the task of this film was to sort of, in the middle of this whole film about death and war and, was this moment of sexual kind of release and hysteria that happens. And it was just really to create that, find the sexiest pieces and whip the boys into a kind of a frenzy, because there's a kind of one moment of release almost in the film.
Yeah.
And so, and when he says, Charlie didn't get much, whatever the acronym was, that's the experience of always contrasting the experience of the Americans against the Vietnamese in the film. So, the film is, the scene is operating, it's fun, it's sexy, but it's operating on both those levels.
Yeah.
And it just took a lot of manipulation of the material. Sometimes it's just hard to believe that 2 minutes or 1 minute, what ends up as 1 minute, you think, well, what's so hard about that? Why did that take weeks to get to? But somehow it does.
Yeah. And in all of that, you saw, and there's so many stories, documentaries written about this, shown about this movie, but Francis fighting to get his vision through. Tell us about what it's like to work with someone like that.
Well, difficult and exciting. You
Yeah.
know, I think that he was an incredible role model for me because he was my first role model, and I feel lucky for that. Not that he's not difficult in some ways to work with, or many people might find there are editors and people in film who really feel that they need to be told what to do, and his approach to filmmaking is the exact opposite, in that he draws from all his different collaborators, and he surrounds himself with a lot of different kinds of collaborators, very, not only great artists, but very nuts and bolts people. So it's kind of like all the different parts of the job are taken up by his team, and he's free to be wildly imaginative because he depends on all of us to execute the vision without actually being told what to do. He never says, do this or do that or cut here or anything ever like that. He's rarely in the cutting room. He likes to see what you come up with and then screen it separately or in the context of a cut, and then give you some vague direction about how it could be better and let you go back and figure that out. And for me, that was a very exciting and creative process. For some people, it might be maddening. For the studio, certainly maddening.
Yeah.
But ultimately, I think it taught a lesson of, like, he believed in his central vision, and I learned that it was okay to be to not know exactly what you were doing at any given moment, but to have a core feeling that in the end you were going to be able to realize that vision. And he took enormous personal and financial risks to make the movie, and it looked for a long time like it was going to be a total failure. Mm-hmm. So, and in the end, it wasn't.
Amazing.
Good lesson for everybody.
Is there something that you bring to every project in the beginning? I know when I start anything, I'm like, oh, this will be the time I'm going to be found out to be just a complete bozo.
Yes, I have that feeling all the time.
Don't you do? Isn't it something that we all feel when we go into it? This isn't going to work
Wait a minute,
out.
I don't know how to do this.
How do you get through? What is it for you that gets you through? What do you need to see? Is it the first minute or two of something coming together? Is there some part of it, now I'm in? What locks in for you when you're trying to get a story going?
Well, I think when I was beginning, it was absolutely essential for me to identify with the content of the film, because that's what kind of I went by my emotional response to the material. Now I could really edit anything, because my craft is fully formed. But in forming my craft, it really had to do with what spoke to me. And I had to choose projects that's very carefully that spoke to me. And then I had sort of the feeling that then I could respond to the material and kind of know what to do. Although often with a lot of trial and error. I often try it this way and try it that way. I almost try to be two different people. I try to do something and then I try to stand back as if I'm not the person who did it and respond to it. That's kind of my process. I try to eliminate my judgmental mind while I'm doing something. I try to just be in a kind of dreamy state, not know exactly what I'm going to do. And then I allow myself to stand back, watch it, and think, wow, that's good, or no, that doesn't work at all. Mm-hmm. I really separate those two functions.
I know the best editors that I work with have the ability to look at something they've done as if they're watching it for the first time.
Yeah.
Is that,
yeah.
Am I saying that the right way?
Yeah, and it's kind of amazing that you can do that month after month after month after month. It's kind of odd, but I can do that. But only if I allow myself to be these two sort of separate people in the process.
You've had what seems like the ability to pick your project, maybe not in the very beginning when you were learning and just kind of going through this, but now I would assume you have to fall in love with something to do it. Is that true?
It's true, but it's always been true, actually, because because I didn't feel like I could do something unless I fell in love with it. I wouldn't know how. And now it's not that I don't know how, it's that I know how all-encompassing any project is. Even the smallest film, even the smallest documentary takes over my mind and my emotions, and I don't want to squander that. Life is short. Yeah. And projects take a lot of energy, so I only do it when I feel like a project really speaks to me.
Can we all just start doing that? Hey, the clock's not ticking, so I don't know where I'm at. And I will sit here for the next week and talk to Lisa, so let's give me some time so I know when I don't want to rip off the audience.
Wow.
So we got, 20 minutes. Excellent. Thank you so much for that. You've come through the time before any of this technology existed.
Yeah.
And today you have it all. Let's talk a little bit about getting on the film table and just spinning the film and putting it all over the place to where we are today. Take us through the history of being an editor and what that impact was to you to kind of follow it through. And did you love it? Did you fall in love with this new way? Is it in the way for you? Tell us about it.
Well, I became an editor not at the beginning of time with the old moviolas. I'm not that old, but I became an editor with the flatbeds, so the reels. Yeah. And in that system, what's great about that system is that whenever you're looking for something, it's not broken out into little bits, like it actually was on the moviola and it is in digital.
Yeah.
you got to watch the whole reel. Even
Yeah.
in fast forward or fast rewind, you got to watch the whole reel to get to that to that take or that moment that you remember that you want. And in going there, or in going back sometimes, or in watching it silently,
Yeah.
you stumble across something that you didn't know you were looking for. And that can be very rich creatively. I talk about that as like the browsing in the bookstore as opposed to ordering from Amazon, where you already know what you want. I mean, Amazon makes suggestions for you about other things, but it's very different than browsing in a bookstore when you don't know what you're looking for and some title calls out to you and you look in it, and then, you know, that's a little bit of the experience of analog editing. But of course, you still have to do your work. And so, you know, it's cumbersome. And then, of course, we were also splicing, cutting with tape.
I love
And
that part, though.
That part, actually, I found to be a very good amount of time to be thinking. There's a certain amount of, I actually thought when I started editing that I was learning a manual skill, and that was very satisfying for me. I came out of academics.
Right.
I wanted to be a neurologist, and then I thought, oh, I'm learning a manual skill. This is so great. But it isn't really a manual skill, but it is a certain amount of manual work. And during that time when you're looking for your trim or making your splice and cutting the tape and moving the thing, you're thinking, and that's downtime. And digital moves so fast that sometimes, you know, the human creative brain does not work like a computer, actually. So the fact that the computer can work 24 hours and you can do 45 different cuts in 20 minutes, that's not necessarily a good thing for the creative process. But eventually I've come around through several iterations of going from film to electronic cutting that was not digital, which was a horrible middle period.
The dark ages.
The dark ages of videotape, very clunky, very bad. And digital is great, but it's different.
Yeah.
And at first I had to really train myself not to just do 4 different versions and not know what I thought. In film, you have to know where you're going, because if you're not going in the right place and you choose to undo it, well, then you undo it and you destroy that version and you make a new version. So it's a little more of a commitment, both directions, to go forward and also to not just let something lie because it's fine, but to take it apart because you know it can be better. In digital, you can do all that, but you have to be disciplined not to just do things without any commitment to one way or another, as if all ways are equal. They're not all equal.
Yeah.
Well, they're not all the same. They lead down different paths.
How did you feel through the period of being a woman in mostly a male-dominated world at that time, I would imagine? And take us through that. Did that have anything to do with how you grew? Did you think about it at all? Was it difficult?
I thought about it a lot. I was the only woman on these big teams on these films, and I was the younger person and woman. So I think this was both certainly a disadvantage and an advantage. I think people didn't expect as much from me or maybe looked down at me, but also mentored me and helped me. So I had both. I had great mentors, actually, in all of these men that I worked with. But I had to work hard to be taken seriously. I did. I had to prove myself. And that was very actively alive in my mind when I chose scenes, when I chose films that the first film that I did by myself. I mean, on The Right Stuff, I was part of a team, but of course I was much more advanced than I was on Apocalypse. I was fully equal or senior member of that team.
Right.
But I was still part of a team of all men. And so in the perception of the larger world, we all get credit. Nobody knows what anybody has done. And so at the end of that project, I felt I very much have to do my own film on which I'm the only editor. And it really has to showcase my talent. And I really went after Children of Lesser God for that reason.
Yeah.
Partly because I loved the project, partly because it was a woman director, and it was her first feature, and partly it's a story about a deaf girl and a hearing man. It's a love story, and it's very challenging in that she doesn't speak. She only signs.
Yeah.
He signs and speaks for himself and for her. So technically, it's incredibly difficult because it's accessible in both languages. A deaf person can watch it and understand the signing. So I was cutting in sign and cutting in language, spoken language, and it's a very small story, not without no bells and whistles, so nothing to hide behind. So I really chose that project quite intentionally as my first solo credit.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Film. And it looked like it was a massive challenge to put that together.
It was, although at the end of the day, most people who loved the film just saw it as a wonderful love story. They didn't really perceive how technically difficult it was, and that was a compliment.
That's the gift and the love we have for everyone that does what you do, that you make it look so simple and easy, and we know, and any of us that get up every day to come to create something, to build something, to bring something from nowhere, know how difficult it is to get that, especially when it looks so easy and it hits you when you stay inside of the story for so long. So, hey, thank you for that. That is a great film. Do you want to talk about The Right Stuff? I know we have a clip from The Right Stuff.
Yeah, I don't know how we're doing time-wise, but I brought two, but I thought I'd start with, I thought The Right Stuff, since this is a conference about the past and the future.
Yeah.
And
supersonic speed.
And supersonic speed. So The Right Stuff is, as a movie, is a story, two threads of the guys who, the first test pilots who broke the sound barrier, who had the right stuff, and how some of them became the first astronauts to go into outer space. And so it was made in '83, I guess. We got the Oscar in '84. And it was before computers, so all the special effects were done by today's standards in a very primitive way. But they were also done quite intentionally by the director to reflect a time, even when we were making it in the 80s, right? Yeah. Of course, we had all seen, it was about a much earlier time, and we'd all seen Star Wars, and we all knew what outer space looked like. But for the people in the movie, the time it was capturing, it was all a great unknown. And so he wanted to create that sense of incredible wonder. Well, fear and courage on the part of the test pilots, if we get to that scene. But the scene I'm going to show, which is the orbit, the 3 orbits around the Earth of John Glenn, first man to orbit the Earth. He was supposed to do 8 orbits, but he only did 3 because he got into trouble. And it's a very long scene. I only chose 3 minutes of it. But that scene took many months to put together. Because in the script it just said, and John Glenn orbited the Earth 3 times, and then the capsule caught on fire. And we tried many ways of experiencing these 3 orbits around the Earth. We tried ways which showed what was happening all around the globe during those times. We tried many ways, and it just really wasn't coming together. In terms of, again, that what I was talking about is like getting to the core of the emotional experience of John Glenn and of the people, who were monitoring his flight, this first flight around the globe. And the challenge was you had to stick to the facts, because all of this is well documented, exactly what happened as he, all the orbits, what he said, and everything is all verbatim. And yet to capture the wonder and the kind of non-literal aspects. So what we worked with in terms of the elements were, we had a special effects department here in San Francisco, headed up by Gary Gutierrez. And that department created matte paintings, giant matte paintings of outer space. And they created the rockets. And the rockets were these tiny little capsules that they would send down wires, just wires. Wires going left and wires going right and wires going down. And they would just shoot these little baby capsules along. And they would record those capsules on the wires on a clear film. And so I would get in the editing room images of these little capsules going left and right, left and right. And then I would have the matte paintings. And then I would have all the NASA footage. That was all the outer space NASA. We worked with a lot of NASA footage of rockets and footage of outer space, and put together the orbits this way. But then there still seemed to be something missing, this sense of wonder. And so Phil Kaufman, the director, hired a very older experimental filmmaker named Jordan Belson, came from an entirely different tradition of film, completely non-narrative, totally experimental filmmaker, to create these experiential feelings of outer space. And Jordan wanted nothing to do with the film itself, the narrative. He didn't like to see images of people's faces. So all that would happen is I would be editing the sequence and I would call up Jordan and say, Jordan, can you make me a moonrise? I need a moonrise. And pretty soon this beautiful moonrise would show up. And we never knew how he did it. He did it on an animation stand using I don't know what. He never would say.
Right. You still don't know?
No, still don't know. No. And so that's how the scene was put together. So I challenge you, while you're watching it, you can see paintings, you can see NASA footage, you can see Jordan Belson's footage. And I made this scene by finally finding a piece of music from the Holtz Planets, which was inspiring to work with.
Yeah.
And that's how the scene was created. But like I said, it took actually months.
Wow.
So I would bypack the images. I don't know, probably nobody here even knows what a flatbed editing machine looks like. But you have 2 reels of film. You have a reel of film going through this and this and this. And I would take the images and literally put them together physically to kind of imagine, because at that time, then you had to order the real shot. So you had to imagine it in your head. I thought, well, could the capsule go left over this NASA image that's moving right? And I would kind of mush them together to kind of get a little bit of an idea of that. Then I could order that shot to be made for real.
Wow.
So this is the rough way of working on it.
Amazing.
So
let's take a look at the John Glenn sequence.
Lord, ride all the way. Godspeed, John Glenn.
Zero G, and I feel fine. The capsule is turning around. Oh! That view is tremendous. I can see clear back, a big cloud pattern, way back across towards the Cape. Man, it's a beautiful sight.
Oh, Roger, Friendship 7. You have a go. At least 7 orbits.
Roger, I'll understand. Go at least 7 orbits. This is Friendship 7. Speed is 17,500 miles per hour. bring in tonight.
Full moon rising. I can almost touch it.
I could talk to you forever. I need to open up, let some people ask some questions. We have a few minutes left. You are just a gift. It is just a gift to have you here today.
Thank you. It's a treat.
Oh, it is just a gift.
Hi, this is JD Swartz from the Creative and Digital team. First off, Lisa, thank you so much for being
Can't
here.
see where you are, but
It's right there.
okay, got it.
Nothing
All
much
right.
to see. Don't worry about it.
Apocalypse Now is such a wonderful movie, and it's become such an iconic movie. I'd love to hear your thoughts about Redux. A, were you part of that? And what are your thoughts about changing a narrative structure after the fact?
I wasn't part of Redux. Walter Murch put Redux together, and I don't have, I don't really. Well, how should I say this? I think it's partly a marketing thing and partly an attempt to include parts of the movie that couldn't be included in the theatrical version. I mean, there were certain constraints on what was an appropriate length for the theatrical version, and so part of one thing that was in the movie. There were a couple of scenes that were in the final, our final version, almost to the last minute, but were removed in the final cut. And one of those was the French Plantation scene that was in Redux, and that was always an amazing scene. It was a scene. It was kind of it went off like on the tributary of the main river of the movie, and ended up at this French plantation, and had a whole kind of political analysis of the French involvement in Vietnam. And we all loved the scene so much, but in the end it had to come out of the final movie. And there were a few other scenes with Brando, likewise, that we really loved, but really felt in the end had to come out of the final movie. So Redux really gave a chance for those scenes to be restored. There were other scenes that got restored that really were on the cutting room floor from the beginning, and I think they belonged on the cutting room floor. And so, I have a mixed feeling about Redux in that way. But it's great to be able to, see those scenes that were great be in a film. And the Godfather series had a similar thing, which is that each movie, Godfather 1, 2, and 3, was made separately with its own kind of integrity and structure. And then the Godfather series was put together, I believe, also by Walter, with just another purpose, which just kind of flattened the structure out to make it linear. Like Godfather 2 is very non-linear, back and forth in time. And so it's just a different animal, really. And I suppose that's interesting that we have those different versions possible.
Excellent. Another question? Hey, Justin.
This is Justin. I sort of found you and gushed at you beforehand about how much I love The Right Stuff. It's one of my all-time favorite movies. But hearing you talk about the need to love something, to commit, I'm curious what it was about that material or what made you commit to that piece.
Well, I read the book by Tom Wolfe, and I thought it was a fantastic book. And I thought the fact that I, who am not at all interested in general in airplanes or rockets, or that kind of stuff, was totally entranced with the story, because at the end of the day, I thought it was a story about courage and risk and imagination. And I thought that Phil is a fantastic screenwriter. I thought the script was fantastic. And it captured all those core emotional things, as well as a kind of trajectory of American history that was really fascinating to me. And it had in the whole film, so many different qualities of humor and wonder. And plus it was just, looking from a professional point of view, a fantastic challenge and, opportunity to work on a film of this scope. And so, of course, I actually, you know, it just didn't just fall into my lap, let's say it that way. I worked hard to get onto it.
I love it. We could talk to you all day. Do you want to leave the audience with one tidbit of advice? Is there something you wanted to say coming here today that you didn't say? Is there anything you could say to us before you leave here today that we could all take in?
Well, I don't know if I have advice, but one of the common themes that I've heard from the sessions that I've been able to attend is about passion and taking whatever you're passionate about out into the world. So I think we've all done that, everybody who's been here today. And you know, that's what I encourage for everybody. It's very easy to get caught up in kind of careerism or I mean, we all need to earn a living, so that's a real thing, needing jobs. But at the same time, I think it's really important not to get stuck and to follow your ultimate vision and to choose carefully what you do with your time, because time is limited. Mm-hmm. And to then ultimately take what you've learned and then put it out elsewhere into the world in unexpected places. I just recently had the chance to, or I didn't have the chance, I just made the chance to direct a documentary in Rwanda. I wanted to take all of the skills that I have, the storytelling skills, the experiences that I have, and put them towards people who don't normally get their stories told. And I found a story that I wanted to tell in Rwanda. I asked my brother, who's a documentary filmmaker, to do it with me. And we got on a plane and did it, went to Rwanda and made a movie. I was kind of tired of the whole large studio structure, the need to raise so much money to do a project. It was, you know, we got a camera, strapped it on our back, got on the plane, made the movie. So
amazing.
And anybody who wants to see it can go to our website called Sweet Dreams Rwanda and check out the film.
Thank you so much, Lisa.
Okay, thank you.
You are such an inspiration to me. Thank you so much.